I was sitting in the corner of an upscale cafe, my laptop open but forgotten as a scene unfolded before me. A woman in her 60s, dressed in a custodial uniform, was carefully mopping near a table where 3 executives were having lunch. Her movements were methodical, respectful, taking care not to disturb them while still completing her work. "Excuse me," she said softly, as she needed to reach the space beneath their table. The youngest executive, a man with cold eyes and an expensive watch, didn't even look up. "Can't you see we're in a meeting? Come back later." His tone cut through the air like ice. "I'm sorry, sir," she replied. "The manager asked me to finish this section before the lunch rush." The executive finally turned to look at her, his face contorted with contempt. "Do you know who I am? Do you know what we're discussing here?" He gestured to the papers spread across their table. "Millions of dollars in business decisions. And you're worried about your mop schedule?" The woman stood straight, her dignity intact despite his venom. "Everyone's work has value, sir." That's when he laughed, a sound devoid of humor, and knocked over his water glass. The liquid spread across the floor she had just cleaned. "Now you have something to mop," he smirked, turning back to his colleagues, who shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. I wanted to intervene, but before I could, an older gentleman at the next table stood up. With quiet authority, he approached. "Damon Williams," he introduced himself to the group, "CEO of Horizon Technology." The executives immediately straightened, recognition flashing across their faces. "I believe you work for Apex Solutions," Williams continued, looking at the man who had been so cruel. "I was considering a partnership with your company next quarter. Worth about $20 million, if I recall." The color drained from the executive's face. Williams then did something unexpected. He bent down, picked up a napkin, and began to help the woman clean the spill. "Miss Jackson here," he said, nodding toward the custodian, "taught me everything I know about respect. Isn't that right, Mom?" The silence that followed was deafening. That moment crystallized something I've been thinking about for years. How we treat the people we consider invisible reveals more about us than any resume or bank account ever could. These invisible people, the custodians, service workers, and maintenance staff who keep our world functioning, often face the harshest judgment from those who've forgotten a fundamental truth. Position doesn't determine worth. Today's story follows a similar path. It's about Malik Johnson, a self-made tech millionaire, and his mother, Amina, a woman whose wisdom ran deeper than her son's bank account. When discrimination crept into Malik's company, Amina suggested an unusual approach to uncovering the truth. Her journey from boardroom mother to undercover janitor would expose not just racist employees, but the blind spots in her son's vision of his own company. This isn't just a story about justice served. It's about seeing the humanity in every person, regardless of their position. Understanding that the way we treat others when we think no one important is watching defines who we truly are. And trust me, someone is always watching. Malik Johnson wasn't born into wealth. At 37, he'd built Horizon Tech from nothing but a college dorm room idea and his mother's unwavering belief. Now, 15 years later, his company occupied the top 8 floors of a downtown skyscraper, employed over 300 people, and had revolutionized data security software for healthcare systems. "Never forget where you came from," Amina Johnson would say whenever Malik achieved another milestone. It was her mantra, one she'd repeated since he was a boy, growing up in a modest 2-bedroom apartment where she raised him alone after his father passed away. Amina had worked as a high school mathematics teacher for 30 years. Her salary was modest, but her impact was immeasurable. She taught Malik that equations were more than numbers. They were stories waiting to be solved. "Look for the pattern," she'd say when he struggled with homework. "Everything has a pattern if you pay close attention." This attention to detail served Malik well. While other tech companies rushed products to market, Malik insisted on thorough testing. While competitors cut corners on customer service, Horizon maintained a dedicated support team. These decisions, seemingly small at the time, built a reputation for reliability that attracted major clients. By his 35th birthday, Malik had joined the ranks of tech millionaires. Forbes featured him in their 40 Under 40 issue. Business channels invited him to speak about innovation and leadership. Yet, despite his success, he still drove the same modest sedan and called his mother every Sunday evening. Amina had retired from teaching 2 years ago. Though retired was hardly the right word, she volunteered at literacy programs, mentored young teachers, and kept a community garden that supplied fresh vegetables to local families in need. Her hands were never idle, her mind never still. "Your success is meaningful only if it lifts others," she reminded Malik regularly. It was this philosophy that shaped Horizon's corporate culture, at least the culture Malik believed he had created. The company handbook opened with Malik's personal statement. "At Horizon, we see beyond race, gender, age, and background to recognize the unique value each person brings. Our differences make us stronger. Our diversity drives innovation." These weren't empty words to him. He'd implemented blind resume reviews, mentorship programs for underrepresented groups, and generous parental leave policies. Diversity statistics adorned the annual reports: 42% female employees, 38% people of color, visibility for LGBTQ+ staff. The numbers looked good. They felt good. They made Malik confident that he'd built something different from the tech giants often criticized for homogeneous workforces. "A company is like a garden," Amina told him when she first toured the Horizon offices. "It needs constant attention. Weeds grow when you're not looking." Malik had laughed off her concern. "We have a great HR department, Mom, and our Chief Diversity Officer just won an industry award." Amina simply nodded, but her eyes noticed what her son did not: the way certain employees stiffened when Malik introduced her, the subtle shift in language when speaking to staff of different backgrounds, the segregated lunch tables in the company cafeteria. "People behave differently when the boss is watching," she remarked quietly on the drive home. "That's true in classrooms and boardrooms alike." Malik dismissed her observation until 3 months later, when the first warning sign appeared. The exit interview of Jasmine Williams, a talented black software engineer who left after just 8 months. "Uncomfortable workplace dynamics," the HR report summarized vaguely. When Malik requested more details, he received a carefully worded explanation about team fit and communication styles. Nothing concrete, nothing actionable. But something about it bothered him enough that he mentioned it to Amina during their Sunday call. "Have you ever walked through your company as someone other than Malik Johnson?" she asked. "What do you mean?" "When I taught, I sometimes sat at a student desk during lunch, just observing. It showed me a different school than the one I saw as a teacher." The second warning sign came a week later. An anonymous note in the suggestion box alleged that certain team leaders were routing high-profile projects away from minority staff. The third was a complaint about jokes made in the break room when management wasn't around. Individual incidents could be explained away. Together, they formed a pattern, and if Amina had taught him anything, it was to recognize patterns. "I think we might have a problem," Malik admitted during their next dinner together. Amina listened as he detailed his concerns. She didn't interrupt, didn't judge. When he finished, she set down her fork and looked at him with the same expression she'd worn when grading complex math problems. "You've built your company on solid principles, Malik, but principles only work when everyone upholds them, not just when you're watching. We have policies, reporting structures, and how well do they work if people are afraid to use them?" The question hung between them. Malik had no answer. "What would you suggest?" he finally asked. Amina took a sip of water, considering. "You need to see your company through different eyes, not as its founder, not as Malik Johnson, tech millionaire." "That's impossible. Everyone knows who I am." "They know me only as your mother," Amina said thoughtfully. "The woman who visits occasionally, the proud mama at company parties." A smile formed slowly on her face. "What if I became someone else for a while? Someone invisible?" "You can't be serious." "I taught high school mathematics for 3 decades, son. I can handle a few weeks as a janitor." Malik started to protest, but Amina raised her hand, the same gesture that had silenced classrooms for 30 years. "You created a beautiful vision for Horizon. Now let me help you see if that vision matches reality." And that was how, at 64 years old, Amina Johnson prepared to become the newest member of Horizon Tech's custodial staff, not as the founder's mother, but as Mary Williams, a woman invisible to those who believed titles determined worth. Malik couldn't sleep. The anonymous complaints had multiplied over the past month. Snippets of overheard comments, reports of overlooked talent, subtle exclusions from team activities. Each individual incident seemed minor, easily explained away. Together, they painted a concerning pattern. "Our diversity initiatives look good on paper," he admitted to Amina over breakfast. "But what if they're just window dressing? What if the culture I thought I built only exists when I'm present?" Amina stirred her tea thoughtfully. "That's why we need eyes and ears where people speak freely. Not as executives, not as HR, but as someone they barely notice." Their plan took shape over the next week. Horizon's building management company had contracted a new cleaning service, providing the perfect opportunity. Malik arranged with the contractor to add Mary Williams to the evening cleaning crew assigned to Horizon's floors. Only the contractor's manager would know her true identity. "Are you sure about this, Mom? You'll be on your feet for hours. The work is physically demanding." Amina fixed him with the look that had quelled generations of students. "I stood teaching calculus for 8 hours a day for 30 years. I can handle a mop." The transformation was remarkable. Amina's elegant silver bob disappeared under a practical wig with streaks of gray. Makeup subtly altered her features. Designer clothes gave way to practical work attire. Most importantly, her confident posture shifted to something more guarded, more invisible. The stance of someone used to being overlooked. "The key is to observe without being observed," Amina explained as she practiced. "People reveal their true nature when they think no one important is watching." They established safety protocols, a daily check-in system, emergency contacts, and a code word that would immediately end the operation if Amina felt unsafe. Malik insisted on a 2-week maximum time frame. "You'll need credentials," Malik said, handing her the ID badge with her photo, now barely recognizable, under the name Mary Williams. "You realize the irony," Amina noted, examining the badge. "I spent years teaching young people to stand out, and now I'm learning how to blend in." Mary Williams reported for her first shift on a Monday evening. The day's staff were still finishing up as the cleaning crew arrived. Standing in the service elevator with her cart of supplies, wearing the blue uniform of contracted workers, Amina felt the weight of her invisibility immediately. 3 employees entered, continuing their conversation without acknowledging the cleaning person in the corner. One complained about a diversity training scheduled for the following week. "Another waste of time to make the boss feel good," he muttered. His colleagues nodded in agreement. Amina's hands tightened on her cart handle, but her expression remained neutral. The first lesson was already clear. Some staff viewed Malik's initiatives as performative rather than substantive. As she moved through the office that evening, some employees smiled or nodded as they packed up to leave. Others walked past as if she were merely part of the furniture. One woman thanked her for emptying the trash. A man deliberately dropped a wrapper next to the bin she had just emptied, glancing at her with a smirk. By the end of her first 4-hour shift, Amina had filled 3 pages in the small notebook hidden in her pocket. The surface-level horizon was polished and progressive. Just beneath that surface lay currents of resentment, bias, and division that official reports would never capture. "Have you ever been misjudged based on appearance?" Malik would later ask his audience. "Share your experiences below, because, as my mother was about to discover, being invisible can reveal hard truths about how we see each other." By her 3rd evening as Mary Williams, Amina had developed a mental map of Horizon Tech. Not just its physical layout, but its human landscape. Who stayed late, which departments clustered together, where tensions simmered beneath polite exchanges. She documented everything methodically, using the skills honed from decades of grading mathematical proofs. Her small notebook filled with observations categorized by floor, department, and severity. The entries revealed a company divided not by official hierarchy, but by invisible social boundaries. On the marketing floor, Director James Harlow never acknowledged her presence. He would continue phone calls while she cleaned, sometimes raising his voice as if her presence was an irritation rather than a necessity. In contrast, his assistant Keisha always greeted Mary, moved items to make cleaning easier, and thanked her before leaving. "My grandmother cleaned office buildings for 30 years, Keisha confided one evening. "She always said you can tell a person's character by how they treat cleaning staff." Amina nodded, staying in character. "Your grandmother was wise." "Some people here could use that wisdom," Keisha replied, glancing toward Harlow's office. The engineering department presented its own dynamics. Vice President Raymond Tucker maintained a diverse team on paper, but Amina noticed how meetings flowed. When Miguel or Zainab offered ideas, Tucker would often nod politely before moving on. When similar suggestions came from white team members, those ideas suddenly became excellent points, worth exploring. The microaggressions accumulated in her notebook. A team lead asking Jamal if he could handle a complex project while simply assigning similar work to white developers. HR manager Diane complimenting Layla's English as surprisingly good. Layla had been born in Michigan. Tucker describing his new hire as a diversity candidate rather than mentioning her Stanford degree. Sales team member Marcus being repeatedly interrupted in meetings, while others spoke uninterrupted. None of these incidents would likely appear in HR reports. Each could be explained away individually. Together, they formed a pattern that validated the anonymous complaints Malik had received. But Amina also found allies she hadn't expected. Nicole from accounting stayed late one evening and noticed Mary struggling with a heavy trash bin. "Let me help you with that," she offered, grabbing the other side. As they walked together, Nicole asked about Mary's family, her commute, how long she'd been cleaning, basic human conversation that most others hadn't bothered with. Similarly, lead developer Wei would acknowledge Mary with a nod each evening and kept his workspace organized to make her job easier. On her fifth night, when she accidentally knocked over his pencil holder, his response was gracious. "No problem at all," he smiled, helping her pick up the scattered pens. "I should have put these away before leaving." The contrast between employees like Wei and those like Tucker fascinated Amina. It wasn't strictly divided by position or department. She found kindness at all levels, just as she found dismissiveness throughout the hierarchy. One particular exchange caught her attention. Mary was emptying trash bins near the break room when she overheard Tucker speaking to two team leads. "Johnson's on another diversity kick," he said with evident annoyance. "Now we need to interview at least 2 minority candidates for every position." "Qualified candidates?" asked one lead. Tucker laughed. "That's the thing. They're rarely as qualified. It's just for show." "At least we know who really gets hired," the other lead responded. All three chuckled. Mary continued her work, face neutral despite her racing heart. The conversation confirmed her suspicions that Malik's diversity initiatives were being undermined from within. Her most troubling observation came during the second week. She noticed that employees of color often worked later than their white colleagues, as if needing to prove their commitment. They second-guessed contributions in meetings. They shared knowing glances when certain comments were made. They were aware, they were coping, they were surviving a system that claimed equality while subtly enforcing anything but. On day 10, Amina witnessed a heated exchange between James Harlow and a black project manager named Andre. Harlow criticized Andre's presentation style as too aggressive and intimidating, despite Andre speaking no differently than other managers. After Harlow left, Andre remained at his desk, frustration evident in his rigid posture. Mary entered quietly to empty his trash bin. "You okay?" she asked, breaking character briefly. Andre looked up, surprised at being asked by the cleaning lady. Then, perhaps seeing genuine concern in her eyes, he sighed. "Just another day of being too much for doing exactly what everyone else does." Mary nodded. "I see you," she said simply, and continued her rounds. What she couldn't tell him was how thoroughly she truly saw and how carefully she was documenting everything. As Amina's second week undercover began, the subtle discrimination she'd observed evolved into something more blatant. The company-wide announcement of upcoming senior developer promotions had heightened tensions throughout Horizon Tech. Monday morning, Mary quietly mopped near the executive conference room where the senior leadership team was discussing candidates. Though the heavy door muffled most conversation, she could clearly hear Raymond Tucker's voice rising in opposition. "Johnson's diversity metrics are making us consider candidates who simply aren't ready," Tucker insisted. "Jamal has technical skills, sure, but he lacks the leadership presence this role requires." "His performance reviews are excellent," countered a woman's voice. The HR director, Amina guessed. "Numbers don't tell the whole story," Tucker replied dismissively. "Will clients respect him? Will the team follow him? There's more to leadership than code quality." Mary continued mopping, moving slowly to catch more of the conversation. "And you believe Dylan has this presence?" the HR director asked. Dylan fits our company culture better, Tucker stated firmly. He understands how we operate. The coded language wasn't subtle to Amina. Culture fit and leadership presence often masked biases against candidates of color. Jamal had been with Horizon for 4 years, longer than Dylan, and had led several successful projects, yet his promotion was being questioned, while Dylan's was presented as obvious. That evening, Mary entered the break room to find Jamal sitting alone, staring at his laptop. The announcement would come tomorrow, but office rumors traveled fast. His dejected expression suggested he'd already heard whispers about the decision. "Excuse me," Mary said, reaching for the trash can beside him. Jamal startled, then moved his chair. "Sorry, I didn't see you there." The irony wasn't lost on Mary. Being unseen was the reality for both of them in different ways. Wednesday brought the official promotion announcement. Dylan's elevation to senior developer was celebrated with handshakes and congratulations throughout the engineering department. Jamal smiled politely, offering congratulations while collecting sympathetic glances from other minority colleagues. Later, Mary overheard Tucker explaining to a colleague, "Jamal just needs more time to develop. We have to maintain our standards." The colleague nodded as if this made perfect sense, though Mary noted that Jamal had consistently exceeded quarterly performance metrics that Dylan had merely met. The most disturbing incident occurred Thursday afternoon. Mary was cleaning the main break room when Tucker entered with James Harlow and Dylan. They continued their conversation, barely acknowledging her presence as she wiped down counters. "Johnson's pushing these diversity initiatives like they're actually helping the company," Harlow commented, pouring coffee. "Last month it was the unconscious bias training. Now it's the mentorship program targeting underrepresented groups." Tucker snorted. "You know how it is. He gets to feel good about himself and we deal with the reality." "Which is?" Dylan asked, leaning forward. "Which is hiring people who wouldn't make the cut otherwise," Tucker replied. "Diversity hires rather than merit hires." Mary kept her focus on the countertop, her heart racing as the men continued. "Jamal seems upset about the promotion," Dylan mentioned, an edge of satisfaction in his voice. "He'll get over it," Harlow dismissed. "These people always want everything handed to them. They don't understand you have to earn your place." "These people?" Dylan's tone was curious, not challenging. Tucker lowered his voice, but not enough. "Let's be honest. Affirmative action gets them in the door. Then they expect special treatment." Mary accidentally knocked over a container of stirrers. As she knelt to collect them, Tucker glanced down with annoyance. "Could you do that later? We're having a conversation here." "Sorry, sir," Mary replied, continuing to pick up the scattered items. "This is exactly the problem," Tucker continued to his colleagues. "No attention to proper time and place." Mary stood, container in hand. "I'm just doing my job, sir." Tucker's face hardened. "Your job is to clean without disrupting important business discussions. Is that so difficult to understand?" Mary remained calm. "I'll come back later." As she turned to leave, Tucker muttered under his breath, but loud enough for her to hear. "Probably another diversity hire. Cleaning companies have quotas too." Then came the slur, casual, dismissive, and clearly audible. Mary froze, her hand tightening on the cleaning cart. She turned back slowly, meeting Tucker's gaze directly for the first time. The moment stretched between them. Something in her eyes made Tucker shift uncomfortably. "Is there a problem?" he asked, defensive now. "No problem," Mary replied quietly. "I heard everything I needed to hear." That night, Amina sat in her car in the empty parking garage, hands shaking as she reviewed her notes, the weight of what she'd experienced, not as Malik Johnson's mother, but as an invisible black woman, pressed heavily on her shoulders. The slurs, the casual dismissal of qualified candidates, the assumption of incompetence. The system working exactly as designed, not to promote equality but to maintain the existing hierarchy while appearing progressive. For 2 weeks, she had maintained her composure, stayed in character, documented meticulously, but tonight the mask had nearly slipped. The temptation to reveal herself to Tucker, to watch his face as he realized who had witnessed his true nature, had been overwhelming. Instead, she had one final day of observation before presenting her findings to Malik. One more day of invisibility before the truth would be revealed. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination at work? Would you speak up immediately, document patterns over time, or find another way to address the issue? The actions we take, or fail to take, shape workplace cultures for everyone. Saturday morning, Malik arrived at Amina's home to find his mother at her kitchen table, surrounded by notebooks and a small recording device. "Mom, are you okay? Your message sounded urgent." Amina looked up, her eyes tired but determined. The wig and makeup were gone, but something about her had changed, as if her 2 weeks as Mary Williams had marked her in ways no disguise could conceal. "I'm fine," she assured him, "but your company isn't." "Perhaps." For the next hour, Malik listened in stunned silence as Amina methodically presented her findings. The notebook pages detailed patterns of discrimination, dates, times, names, and direct quotes. The recordings captured conversations never meant for the CEO's ears. Tucker's voice played clearly from the device. Affirmative action gets them in the door. Then they expect special treatment. Harlow discussing Jamal's qualifications. "He's technically proficient but not leadership material. You know what I mean." The casual slur that had nearly broken Amina's cover, Malik's expression hardened with each revelation. "I had no idea it was this systematic," he finally said, his voice barely controlled. "I knew we had issues, but this—" "Most discrimination happens when power thinks no one is watching," Amina replied. "The question is, what will you do now that you know?" Malik stood, decision made. "I'm calling an emergency all-staff meeting. Monday morning, 9 a.m. "What about your board?" "I'll inform them after. This can't wait." Monday morning arrived with an atmosphere of confusion. An all-staff emergency meeting was unprecedented at Horizon. Employees filled the company's largest conference room, speculation buzzing as they waited. At precisely 9 a.m., Malik entered with Amina beside him, not as Mary Williams but as herself. The room quieted immediately. "Good morning," Malik began, his voice steady. "I'd like to introduce someone many of you know as my mother, Amina Johnson. For the past 2 weeks, however, most of you have known her as Mary Williams, a member of our evening cleaning staff." Gasps and murmurs spread through the room. Tucker and Harlow exchanged alarmed glances from their front row seats. "I initiated this undercover operation after receiving concerning reports about our company culture," Malik continued. "What my mother discovered confirms my worst fears. Horizon's commitment to diversity and inclusion has been sabotaged from within by the very leaders entrusted to uphold it." Malik gestured, and a screen behind him displayed anonymized quotes. The evidence Amina had meticulously. "These statements were made by people in this room, people who smiled to my face while undermining everything this company stands for." He turned directly to face the front row. Raymond Tucker, James Harlow, Dylan Matthews, among others. Tucker stood, face flushed. "This is outrageous. You can't possibly—" "Actually, I can," Malik interrupted, pressing a button on the remote. Tucker's voice filled the room, including the racial slur directed at Mary. The recording continued, capturing the conversation about diversity hires and "these people." The silence that followed was absolute. "Effective immediately, the following individuals are terminated from Horizon Technologies." Malik read 7 names, including Tucker, Harlow, and Dylan. "Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. Your company accounts have already been deactivated." As security personnel stepped forward, Harlow protested, "You can't do this. We have rights." "Your employment contracts explicitly prohibit discrimination of any kind," Malik cut in. "The evidence is irrefutable. You're welcome to challenge this legally, but I assure you, our documentation is thorough." The named employees were escorted out, leaving a stunned audience behind. Malik turned to the remaining staff. "To those who were targeted, marginalized, or overlooked, I failed you by not seeing what was happening. That changes today." He outlined immediate actions: an independent audit of all promotion decisions from the past 3 years, revised reporting structures, and mandatory anti-racism training for all leadership, himself included. "Finally," he said, "I'm pleased to announce that Jamal Washington will be promoted to senior developer, effective immediately." Scattered applause grew into genuine support as Jamal, visibly moved, nodded his thanks. As the meeting concluded, employees approached Amina, some apologetic, others grateful, many simply astonished. Her time as the invisible Mary Williams had ended, but her impact on Horizon was just beginning. The weeks following the confrontation brought swift and substantial changes to Horizon Tech. Empty offices were quickly filled with new leaders chosen not just for their technical skills, but for their demonstrated commitment to inclusivity. Jamal stepped into his senior developer role with quiet confidence, while Keisha from marketing was promoted to replace Harlow as director. Malik established a cultural accountability committee comprised of employees across all departments and levels. The committee had real authority to review decisions, propose policy changes, and monitor workplace dynamics. Their first action was implementing anonymous feedback channels that reported directly to both HR and Malik himself. "We're rebuilding trust," Malik explained in department meetings, "and trust requires transparency." Staff reactions varied widely. Some employees expressed shock at the extent of the discrimination. Others admitted they'd noticed but felt powerless to address it. For employees of color who had endured the subtle hostility, validation came with complicated emotions. "I kept thinking maybe I was being too sensitive," Andre confided to Amina when she visited the office a month later. "Hearing those recordings, it hurt, but it also confirmed I wasn't imagining things." Nicole from accounting described the atmosphere differently. "It's like everyone can breathe more freely now. The tension that was always humming in the background is gone." The most profound shift came from those who had witnessed discrimination but remained silent. Wei, the lead developer who had always treated Mary with respect, organized discussion groups where employees could honestly examine their own complicity in allowing harmful behaviors to continue. "Being non-racist isn't enough," he told his colleagues. "We need to be actively anti-racist. That means speaking up when we see problems, not just avoiding being part of the problem." 3 months after the confrontation, measurable changes emerged. Employee satisfaction scores rose across all demographics. Productivity increased, particularly in formerly toxic departments. Applications from qualified minority candidates doubled as word spread about Horizon's genuine commitment to inclusive practices. The cleaning staff, the real employees, not undercover executives, reported feeling more respected. Malik had implemented a policy requiring all employees to clean their own workspaces before leaving each day, with professional cleaning focused on common areas and deep cleaning. The simple act of requiring everyone to take responsibility for their space shifted subtle power dynamics throughout the building. 6 months in, industry publications took notice. A profile in Business Leadership Today highlighted Horizon's transformation, praising the courage to confront entrenched discrimination and rebuild from the foundation up. Other tech companies began reaching out to learn from their approach. On the anniversary of Amina's undercover operation, mother and son sat together on her porch swing, watching fireflies emerge in the evening garden. "The company quarterly reports look good," Amina noted, sipping her tea. Malik smiled. "Better than good. Revenue up 18%, staff retention at an all-time high. The board is thrilled." "And how about Malik? Is he thrilled too?" He considered her question carefully. "I'm proud of what we've built, but I'm also humbled by how blind I was. All those years thinking we were different, better." "Most bias hides in plain sight," Amina replied. "We only see it when we're willing to look from a different perspective." "I still can't believe you pulled it off. 2 weeks as Mary Williams, weren't you afraid?" Amina set down her tea. "Not of them. I was afraid for the people who had to endure that environment every day, with no end date, no escape plan." Malik nodded, understanding the distinction. "The work isn't finished," he acknowledged. "Culture isn't transformed in a day or even a year." "No," Amina agreed. "But now, you're actually doing the work, not just talking about it." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness settled over the garden. Finally, Malik asked the question that had lingered for months. "Would you do it again, knowing everything you experienced?" Amina smiled, the wisdom of her years evident in her eyes. "In a heartbeat. Some truths can only be learned when we're willing to become invisible, to discover who people truly are when they think no one important is watching." Malik took his mother's hand, grateful for her courage and the lesson that continued to guide his company forward. True change begins when we see beyond titles to recognize the humanity in everyone, from the CEO to the person quietly cleaning the floors after everyone else has gone home. The story of Amina and Malik Johnson offers us more than just a narrative about workplace discrimination. It illuminates fundamental truths about human dignity, leadership, and our responsibility to one another. True dignity isn't granted by job titles or corner offices. It's inherent in every person, whether they run a million-dollar company or clean its floors after hours. When we fail to recognize this basic truth, we create environments where some voices matter and others don't, where some people are visible while others become background fixtures in their own workplace story. Genuine leadership isn't measured by authority alone, but by the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. Malik believed he had built an inclusive company because he wanted to believe it. His intentions were admirable, but intentions without awareness become hollow gestures. It took his mother's wisdom, her willingness to step into invisibility, to reveal what his position of power had hidden from him. This story mirrors challenges faced across our society. In workplaces, schools, and communities nationwide, people experience the subtle and overt discrimination that Amina witnessed. The coded language, the passed-over promotions, the casual dismissal of talent. These aren't isolated incidents, but patterns woven into systems designed to maintain certain power structures while appearing to welcome everyone. The most powerful lesson here isn't that discrimination exists. Most of us already know this. The lesson is that addressing it requires deliberate action, becoming uncomfortable, seeing from new perspectives, and having the courage to make substantive changes rather than symbolic gestures. Ask yourself, who remains invisible in your environment? Whose voices go unheard? What truths might you discover if you changed your vantage point? Real change happens when we recognize that diversity isn't just about demographics in annual reports. It's about creating spaces where everyone's humanity is fully acknowledged, where talent isn't overlooked because it comes in a package different from what we expect. Like Amina showed us, sometimes the most important perspective is the one we've been trained not to notice. This story touched me deeply. If it moved you too, please like, share, and subscribe to help spread these important messages. Your engagement helps these stories reach others who need to hear them. Share your own experiences in the comments below. When have you been underestimated or witnessed someone being treated as invisible because of who they are?